Product provided by Nintendo, specifically Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition. Xenoblade Chronicles is one of my favorite series in all of gaming. It's a series that I've played for almost 10 years at this point, and it's one that has always stuck with me. From my first steps on the alien planet of Mira to exploring the backs of giant titans in 2, the series is one known for its engaging stories, incredible cast of characters, and beautiful worlds and soundtracks that tie it all together. A series that I once thought was fully over with Xenoblade 2, where a possible Xenoblade 3 was little more than a kid wishing upon a star. The series has blossomed into what it is today. Numerous new entries, revisiting older titles to polish the experience and bring them online for the Nintendo Switch. Rare is it when we get a series that comes out with as many titles as Xenoblade has, that is able to retain the quality Xenoblade has managed. Hello everyone, I am Jmulls, and Xenoblade is a series that, for me at least, is an example where every entry may end up finding its way into my top 20 or so games of all time. A series that, in my eyes, has no blemishes, no missteps, no awkward mistakes when it comes to full releases. And as we enter a doldrum period for the series, as we all wait with bated breath for the next mainline installment, a question tickles the back of my mind. Why isn't Xenoblade Chronicles more popular? Why is it still widely considered a niche RPG? Well, the more I think on this question, the more I am convinced that it's not strictly because of any one trait of the series, but a culmination of various design choices that are kind of ingrained in the Xenoblade IP. And today, I want to go over them, talk about what I believe is holding the series back from more popularity, why I think that's important, and where I see this beloved series going from here. So please sit back and relax as we engage in one of my favorite activities, talking about video games and talking about Xenoblade Chronicles. First off, I think it's important to address one elephant in the room. I am a firm believer that the quality of a series is not necessarily proportional or even related to its overall popularity in terms of sales. I am not going to be someone who tries to leverage a different series' sales in an effort to take down another for not matching that number. A game will sell well for a variety of reasons, but I think it is within those reasons we can possibly find ways to improve Xenoblade. That may sound a bit contradictory, however, I do think there are various elements of a Xenoblade experience that are deeply flawed, that are really holding it back, especially when it concerns new players. I would love if Xenoblade sold even more, because it's one of the few series out there that I genuinely want more and more people to experience and to fall in love with, just like I did all those years ago, and continue to do so. A similar feeling to sharing your favorite song with a friend, hoping that their reaction reminds yourself of your own reaction when you first experienced it. To be able to live vicariously through their first impressions, to experience the glimmer in someone's eyes as they fall in love with your favorite thing, is an experience that I think is special. And Xenoblade is an IP of limitless potential. Perhaps one of the best ways to now actually talk about the series is to list what I do not believe to be problematic in terms of the mainstream appeal of Xenoblade, or even just more appeal for the series. That would be the music, the world design, and the story, including both plot, pacing, and characters. You and I can engage in spirited debates and rousing discourse in regards to which Xenoblade game we view to have the best story or characters, X and 2. However, I view these elements to be excellent across the board for the franchise. And while each entry executes on these principles differently, I think overall, when it comes to selling people on a new Xenoblade game, each game sticks the landing, and any deviation doesn't particularly move the needle for a Xenoblade inexperienced crowd. These are the things that I think have made people fall in love with the series and have built the community to be what it is today, and what also acts as the glue to continue to have people stick around with bated breath, wanting to find out what happens next, or what wild plot twist awaits us next from the incredible minds over at Monolith Soft. No, I believe the issues with Xenoblade can largely be found on the gameplay side of things, and it is here that I think systematic issues that arise in every Xenoblade entry serve and act as walls that prevent people from fully becoming invested in the entry. I'm a firm believer that it is the gameplay of a game that is the single most important element for a game's overall popularity and success. It is a video game after all, and while story, characters, and world design are important, don't get me wrong, people en masse at the end of it all are purchasing a video game, and if they don't enjoy the simple act of pressing their buttons, that will turn a lot of people off from the experience. Bear in mind, on this issue for me, it's not a matter of does 2 or X or 3 or 1 do it better than the others. Every title is equally culpable on this issue in my eyes, for a few key reasons I wish to explore today. Reason number 1, the early game. One of the most important parts of a game is the first few moments, when you pick up the controller and get to play. That leaves impressions in the minds of every player that gets exposed to your series, whether that be players or people simply watching a stream or a playthrough. It's paramount that the game is able to hook you in those opening minutes or even the opening hour and make you want to play more, but not just that, but to crave it. And I think this is something Xenoblade largely fumbles on, where arguably the entry that handles this the best, Xenoblade 3, still largely doesn't stick the landing to me. But why is this? Well, I think the early game of Xenoblade shows off the biggest flaws with the overall gameplay of the series. The art system. The art system is essentially a series of buttons and abilities that you press with various effects to do damage, mitigate incoming damage, heal, support, debuff, buff, whatever. They have a variety of effects, and in lieu of a traditional combo system many action RPGs may be known for, Xenoblade has a combat system that harkens more to the tab-targeting MMOs like World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy XIV, or Star Wars The Old Republic, among many others. However, herein lies the problem. For Xenoblade 1 and X, you get one horizontal hotbar for all of your abilities, but because we are playing on Nintendo consoles like the Switch, we don't have a keyboard that you would have in an MMORPG to hit your buttons quickly and seamlessly. Instead, you have to awkwardly hit the D-pad repeatedly, not to do actual cool abilities or anything, but to simply cycle over to the ability that you want to press. And because Xenoblade is Xenoblade, the arts themselves, unless you know how to build, which largely isn't available right out the gate, you will have a period of time where you are waiting around on the cooldown of your abilities to come back up so you can press buttons again. It leads to a system where you spend most of your time trying to get to the actual thing you want to press, and especially in the early stages of Xenoblade games, you spend another giant portion of your time not really playing the game, but waiting for the ability to press your buttons. This leads to unresponsive feeling gameplay and a combat system that doesn't feel engaging or mechanically intensive, but also it doesn't make the combat feel strategic and tactical either. It makes it feel sluggish and bland, and when it comes to a game for mass appeal, that is a killer. In fact, I think of all the points I will bring up in this video, or even other points other people may bring up, this is probably the biggest issue the series faces, because it's also not just relegated to the early game. It just felt more intensely in that early game because of a lack of arts. But also, especially in the early game, it's just felt more keenly the more inexperienced someone is with Xenoblade and the earlier that you are in a game. Xenoblade 2 and 3 try to address this problem of spending most of your time scrolling the hotbar by binding your arts to actual buttons. Seems like a good solution, and yeah, it kind of is. And while I do think this leads to more satisfying button inputs, the problem is, the cooldown time for these arts is brought back into the conversation, and is felt even more supremely here because you aren't wasting your time cycling through abilities, where by doing so, it was kind of alleviating the cooldown because it took time to get to the thing. Instead, you are forced to wait with no filler input available. Xenoblade 2 tries to get around this by giving you Mithra, who is far faster paced compared to a lot of what you will have available early on, generally speaking. However, she's not unlocked till the end of Araya. That is a long time to wait. 3 tries to get around this by letting you swap party members in combat to use their arts. A neat idea, however these characters are also AI controlled when you aren't using them, and likely, when you're not using them, they're using their arts by themselves. So it can alleviate the problem somewhat, but not fully, and in my opinion, not to a sufficient degree. Xenoblade X Definitive Edition introduced Quick Cooldown, a button that you press that instantly brings an art out of cooldown, and simply using it only costs you a pot of a bar that most of the time won't even run out during non-boss encounters. This leads to combat far more fast-paced, especially compared to Original X. It is a game changer. However, remember, it's still X, so you are still dealing with the horizontal bar stuff. Also, you only get this in chapter freaking 3. Sure, you can rush to that point, but a new player isn't going to know about that. But also, you shouldn't have to, right? Like, think about it. You shouldn't have to rush the main story for the privilege of making the combat somewhat engaging. I've been playing Xenoblade for almost 10 years, on and off again, sure, but for almost 10 years. I'm used to it. I have played MMORPGs for most of my life. I am used to this. However, most other people aren't. So while it may not be a put-off for me, I can understand and be cognizant of the fact that for many others, it would be. This is an unnecessary wall holding the series back, and I genuinely believe it's far more important than people realize. The gameplay should be fun and engaging and craveable right out of the gate, and that is a feeling you shouldn't have to earn. It's a video game at the end of the day. It should be fun from the get-go. To go alongside this, let's be fair, the tutorials in this series leave a lot to be desired. I think they got a little bit better in Xenoblade X Definitive Edition, don't get me wrong, but that's still not saying much. In 3, it was far too handholdy and frequent to where it became annoying as they held your hand navigating each menu, and sometimes they just throw way too much information at the player in giant blocks of text. All at once as well, like in X Definitive Edition. Or they don't properly explain how the game really functions, like the important stuff, without having to access some obscure menu for even more reading no one's going to do. The game should teach you how to properly play through the gameplay instead of just giving you sections of novels for you to read. If you pair tutorials that are far more succinct, clear, and to the point, alongside revisions to the combat system to tighten up controls, particularly in the early game, and I think these fixes go a long way. Now, another element in all of this is the animation delay that certain abilities have. Whether that be at the end of an animation or at the beginning of one, this applies to most Xenoblade games, but also particularly Xenoblade X, as that is a very fresh experience in my eyes, but with how grandiose and visually sprawling these games can be. Fighting giant enemies with various visual effects going off. Why is it that Ghostwalker has an animation that prevents me from doing anything, where my guy goes for a nice little stroll in combat? In the mess of everything on my screen, I barely notice it, and it just makes the game have this unnecessary delay and almost feel as if the game is taking my controller away from me. It's not the only animation like this, by the way. A lot of art inputs in Xenoblade across the board can have animations that just last too long, that lead to the gameplay flow feeling unsatisfying. This is especially true for the start of animations, where I press a button and I feel as if I have to wait a bit to see the result of that input. It makes it feel clunky and unresponsive, and again, when paired with the previous issues that I've talked about, it's an effect that is snowballing here to create an experience that won't appeal to a wider audience. On top of that, when you're fighting really giant enemies, by the way, the camera work in this game can be shoddy at best. And also, it can just look really awkward when you're actually fighting giant enemies. And that awkwardness can lead to unsatisfying gameplay loops. If you're tuned in with Xenoblade and you love Xenoblade overall, sure, you may not bother with caring about this kind of stuff. But again, if we're talking about why isn't Xenoblade more popular, it's stuff like this that people may not consciously pick up on, but they subconsciously pick up on it. And it can be obvious very early on in a lot of these games. Xenoblade tries to have a blend between responsive real-time combat with strategical elements, but I think it hasn't quite found the happy medium between these two yet, which can lead to gameplay experiences feeling quite unique but also jarring. I think this series can have incredible customization and player expression when it comes to team composition or picking what arts and skills your characters can come equipped to battle with. It's one of the reasons that I love this series. However, the act of hitting your buttons can still leave a lot to be desired for all the reasons I've talked about. Another crucial element to all of this is the thing you are actually fighting in these games: enemy design. I think this is one of the weakest elements of every Xenoblade game. There is no exception here. Because far more often than not, enemies don't feel as if they are doing anything that I need to pay attention to. They may deal damage, sure, but I can just heal it, or gear my characters or spec my characters in such a way to make that damage negligible at worst. Without interesting enemies to fight consistently, it really limits the strategy I have to formulate for each of the fights, which just leads to fights, from regular mobs to even bosses, feeling like little more than HP sponges that I just have to whittle down, not particularly caring about what they do or who they do what to. Xenoblade X tries to get around this issue with limb targeting, where you can destroy limbs to prevent enemies from using abilities associated with that limb, which is cool, but I don't think it really moves the needle much for me on this issue. Though I want to just state, targeting limbs is a really cool concept for the series that I do hope it explores more in the future. I think it can be part of the solution, however, I just think the interpretation in X isn't the solution by itself. 2 tries to get around this with Bringer of Chaos difficulty, where bosses utilize more mechanics and those mechanics are more impactful. And honestly, 2 Bringer of Chaos is a decent example of what I want out of Xenoblade in this regard. You don't need to make the game ball-bustingly difficult or anything like that, but I should feel that the enemies that I'm fighting are doing different things and behave differently. Malice's Monado Eater was something that I had to learn and be on the lookout for, because it could lock me down and prevent me from hitting buttons that I want to press. The giant robot throwing missiles on the ground that I had to destroy before they blew up made me pay attention to what was going on. More of that, please. I need to be clear on this. I am not stating that Xenoblade needs to be a harder game. What I am saying is that for those of us who seek a challenge, or even for people that just want to know the game is trying to do something at them to some degree, you can have all the visual variety when it comes to enemies you want, and Xenoblade has that in spades. There's a lot of really cool monsters, especially in X. However, it doesn't amount to much when you don't really feel those differences in the actual combat. I think if Xenoblade is able to incorporate more unique mechanics that I have to be on the lookout for consistently, while also pairing together the benefits of limb targeting that Xenoblade X had, I think that could go a long way to not only incorporate things this series has already done, but it could go a long way to address this massive problem that I have with the game series. Xenoblade Chronicles is at a crossroads. The Klaus arc is done. Xenoblade X ties everything together, and we're all waiting for the next mainline entry, what is almost certainly Xenoblade Chronicles 4, or whatever the hell they end up calling the thing, maybe Xenoblade Saga, who knows. They have the opportunity to really change the game here, and to move this series, to move this IP into a direction that will capture the hearts and minds of many more gamers that are out there, that maybe want to get into the series, but for whatever reason, just bounced off. And I think a lot of those people that bounced off the series, or just never gave it 2 cents, bounced off for a lot of the reasons I talked about in this video. And there are numerous ways to address this. This isn't just like, you have to listen to what I'm saying, and if you do it, I'll guide you to the promised land. I mean, I'll do that, don't get me wrong. But I'm just saying, there are multiple ways to address the systemic issues with Xenoblade and move this series in a better direction to attract more and more people to it. These options range from the extreme, like maybe you could just change the genre of gameplay. You could do that, I don't think it's necessary, but you could do it. Like, you could make it turn-based again, kind of like how Saga was, but you run the risk of ostracizing the audience you've already established, and realistically, is that the smart play here? Probably not. You could go maybe the route of, say, Final Fantasy XVI, where the icon abilities are kind of similar to the art system from Xenoblade Chronicles. However, to go alongside the icon abilities in Final Fantasy XVI, you have regular melee combos. So like maybe Xenoblade could incorporate something like that. A basic light and heavy attack, and you have the arts as like accoutrement on top of that, instead of like the only thing you're really pressing. I think Xenoblade 4 should go in the direction of blending the combat systems from X Definitive Edition with Xenoblade 3. I think you retain the quick cooldown from X Definitive Edition with the button layout that 3 brings to the table. You bring back the interlink mechanic, speed it up a bit so it's not like really slow, and for a really cool factor, and also what I think they're probably going to do, and I'll make a video on this entirely because trust me, I can like spitball ideas all day long, but as a sample, as a taste, for instance, combine the interlink mechanic with the scale mechanic so you can combine giant robots together to make an even bigger giant robot. I think one of the things they need to do and to focus in on is to either lean more into strategy or lean more into responsive gameplay. Either speed things up or really lean into the strategy of picking your arts and fight design like that, or make it more mechanically satisfying and hectic and fast-paced and cool to hit your buttons. You probably want both to some degree, but I think you need to really specialize in one or the other. But yeah, I love Xenoblade Chronicles, and I want to see it grow and to become bigger and better than what it has been before. Because I think this series has endless potential, and the sky is not even the limit for it. But that's why I like making videos like this, to list out what I perceive to be problems that the game and the series can address moving forward, because I want to see the series continue to grow and to blossom instead of stagnate and rest on its laurels. And I think with that, I'll call the video there for the day. Thank you all for tuning in. My pleasure for making the video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. Leave a comment down below with what you deem to be the series' biggest issues that you think they can remedy for Xenoblade 4. I'd love to hear your thoughts, hear your opinions, and hear your perspectives. Stay safe, have a great day, go play some video games, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody. Until we meet again!